Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're sinking into a much slower kind of nightmare, one where your own body betrays you, not by bleeding or blistering, but by turning you into stone. You're a medieval peasant, already filthy, tired and hungry, and now, for reasons no one understands, your muscles have started hardening into bone. The village healer suggests leeches. The priest recommends confession. Your neighbour says it's demons. Spoiler, it's not demons. It's a real condition. Extremely rare, impossibly cruel, and utterly untreatable. Especially in a world where most people think sneezing is a moral failing. So before your limbs fuse completely, and someone tries to amputate the wrong thing with a rusty saw and divine intention, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access and other perks, check out the Patreon in the description. Now take a slow breath while you still can, and let's begin. You're a medieval peasant, which is a bit like being a dishwasher, a ditch digger, a janitor, and a human scarecrow all rolled into one, except with worse job security and no shoes. You wake up every morning stiff, hungry and cold, which is also how you go to sleep. The hut you live in is technically a home, though it's really just 4 crooked walls, a thatched roof with trust issues, and a fire pit that only smokes when you're not looking. There's no bed, just straw. There's no privacy, just family. And there's no breakfast, unless something didn't starve last night. Your days are full of important tasks like hauling buckets of water from a stream that may or may not give you dysentery, chasing chickens who don't like you, and getting yelled at for existing incorrectly. You're surrounded by mud, smoke, and relatives who smell like turnips and passive aggression. Your diet consists mainly of whatever you can mash into a paste. Barley gruel, bean mush, onion stew, all lovingly seasoned with ash, hair, or gravel. Meat is a luxury, salt is suspiciously valuable, and if you've tasted fruit recently, you probably stole it. Work starts before sunrise and ends when it gets too dark to see your fingers, which is funny because you're starting to lose feeling in your fingers anyway, but not for the reason you think. You're bent over in a field for hours on end, harvesting someone else's grain with someone else's tools so they can pay you in the privilege of not being whipped. The church takes a cut, the local lord takes a cut, and your family takes the rest because you're all trying to survive on the same slice of nothing. There's no such thing as savings, retirement, or rest. There is only toil, prayer, and the hope that death skips your house this winter. You don't expect much out of life. No one around you lives long enough to become old in the modern sense. 30 is considered elderly. Teeth are a fading memory. A warm bath is a legend your grandmother once heard from a travelling monk. But you endure it all. The damp floors, the bad dreams, the back pain that started when you were 12 and never left. Yeah, because that's what life is. Miserable, repetitive, and mostly pain, punctuated by the occasional boiled root. It begins so quietly, you almost miss it. Just a bump on your shoulder, barely noticeable beneath the grime of your shirt. You assume it's from hauling firewood or swinging a tool with more effort than technique. You rub it and keep going. Everything hurts all the time anyway. Why should this be different? But the bump doesn't fade. It hardens, not like a bruise or a welt, not tender, not angry, just there, solid, as if a pebble has lodged itself under your skin and decided to stay. A few days later, you notice the stiffness. Your shoulder doesn't want to lift past a certain angle, and the muscles around it feel tight, like rawhide that's been left out too long in the sun. You try rolling it, stretching it, cracking it. Nothing helps. You keep moving through the pain because that's what life requires. No one's going to take over your chores just because your arm's acting strange. But it nags at you, slow and persistent, like a splinter buried too deep to pull. By the end of the week, your arm isn't just stiff, it's stuck. You can still move your elbow a little, but your shoulder barely rotates. It feels like someone hammered a nail through your joint while you slept, then politely covered it with skin. There's no wound, no fever, no discoloration, just an eerie, immovable weight where your range of motion used to be. You tell yourself it'll pass. Maybe it's the damp. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe you're just getting old, even though you're not. The healer gives you a look like she's already planning your funeral and suggests a blend of sheep fat and garlic. You smear it on and immediately smell like dinner gone wrong. The stiffness remains. Someone else recommends warming the area with a stone from the hearth. You try that too. It burns your skin a little, doesn't touch the stiffness. A travelling tanner swears he knew a man who had the same problem after sleeping on a cursed hill, and that you should spit into the east wind at sunrise. You try that too, just in case. It makes your mouth dry, nothing else changes. And eventually, the pain fades. But not in the way pain usually does. It doesn't resolve. It just disappears into numbness. The arm doesn't ache anymore. It just doesn't work. The muscles feel wrong somehow. Thicker, tighter, less like flesh and more like old leather that's been left to dry over a rock. You poke at it, press your fingers into the lump near your shoulder blade, and feel something horrifying beneath the skin. Not soft tissue, not muscle, but something rigid. Something that shouldn't be there. Something bone-like. You don't have the language for what's happening. There are no words in your village for ossification or congenital disorders. No concept of a bodybuilding bone where it shouldn't. All you have is instinct, and instinct tells you one thing. This isn't going to stop. And worse, no one will believe you. Your mother rolls her eyes and says you're probably faking it to get out of hauling firewood. Your father hits you with a stick to remind the limb how to behave. Even the healer, after a long squint and a sigh, tells you to confess your sins and try not to sleep on your side. But sin doesn't explain why your other shoulder is starting to feel tight now too, or why your neck hurts when you try to turn it more than a few inches. You pretend to ignore it, but it's impossible not to notice the gradual betrayal of your own body. The way movement becomes harder each morning. The way your joints grind silently under the skin. One day, while walking across the yard, your foot catches on something. A rock, a root, it doesn't matter. You stumble, try to catch yourself, and fall straight to the ground, like a felled tree. You couldn't throw your arm out in time. It didn't move. Later you sit by the fire, poking at the embers with your good hand, cradling the other against your chest. It doesn't hurt exactly. It's just heavy, cold, remote, like it belongs to someone else. You try to remember how long it's been since you used that arm properly, to lift a pail, to comb your hair, to wipe your mouth. You can't. Time is slippery like that, especially when it's soaked in fear. What makes it worse is how slow it is. If you woke up one morning paralysed, it might almost be easier. Tragic, yes, but at least there would be clarity. Instead, it's this creeping dread, this daily uncertainty. Will you be able to bend today? Will your jaw open all the way? Will you be able to lift your spoon? The terror isn't in what you've lost. It's in what's next, what's still waiting. You tell no one. Not really. What would you even say? I think I'm turning to stone isn't the kind of phrase that invites helpful conversation in a place where most people still think fevers come from sinful thoughts and demons live in wells. So you hide it. You adapt. You adjust your movements, your tasks, your expectations. You learn how to look useful without being useful. You become fluent in avoidance. But deep down, under every adjustment and excuse, you know the truth. This isn't injury. This isn't illness. This is transformation. Slow, unstoppable, and irreversible. You are being changed by something you don't understand. Something ancient and cruel and utterly indifferent to your prayers. And it has only just begun. At some point, you decide to tell someone. Maybe it's desperation, maybe it's guilt, or maybe you just need to say it out loud so it doesn't keep rattling around in your head like a death rattle made of bone. You pick the healer because she has herbs and a vaguely trustworthy squint. You sit across from her, trying to describe what you've been feeling. The stiffness, the freezing joints, the way your body feels like it's sealing itself shut. She listens, she nods. Then she tells you it's probably a cold wind that got trapped inside your shoulder. Her solution is to bleed your arm and warm it with fox fat. You smile, thank her, and leave before she pulls out a knife. Next, you try your mother, not because she's particularly warm, but because she's always had an opinion about everything, especially things that go wrong. You show her your arm, the way it won't lift, the way it jerks in small unnatural arcs. She frowns and tells you you've been slouching too much, says it's from bad posture, that your body's giving up because you're lazy. She recommends standing straighter and getting more sun. You point out that you spend every waking hour outdoors. She waves that off and mutters something about weak blood and bad sleep habits. Eventually, you bring it up to the priest, not because you trust him, but because you're running out of options. He listens, then closes his eyes and says the word impurity 3 times in a voice that's more performance than comfort. He asks if you've been having impure thoughts. You hesitate. He takes that as a yes. His solution is to pray harder and fast twice a week. You tell him it hurts to kneel. He tells you that's part of the process. Pain means God is listening. Your cousin says it's from too much sour ale. A neighbour suggests you've been cursed by a widow whose fence you once kicked. A passing traveller says you're being punished for sleeping with your mouth open during a thunderstorm. A very old man with one working eye offers to spit on your elbow and whisper something in Latin. You almost let him. None of it helps. You're quietly, steadily fusing, joint by joint, inch by inch, and every piece of advice you receive is worse than the last. People mean well mostly, but they're clinging to a worldview where suffering has to have a reason, a cause, a moral failing they can fix or at least blame. Your body isn't just breaking, it's breaking their understanding of how bodies are supposed to behave. That makes them uncomfortable. And in the Middle Ages, when people get uncomfortable, they don't ask questions. They hand you a rosary and step away. So you learn to stop talking. You smile when people offer theories. You nod when they prescribe boiling nettles or walking backward through a sheep pasture. You become an expert in pretending to take advice you never asked for. Because the moment people realise you're beyond help, not sick, but wrong, they stop seeing you as one of them. And really, what would they even do if they did understand? There are no surgeons here, no physicians. The closest thing to a medical book is a scroll in Latin no one can read, locked in the church behind a door that squeaks like it's in pain. Even if someone cared enough to help, there's nothing to be done. Your condition doesn't just resist treatment, it ignores it. It isn't interested in poultices or prayers. It just continues without drama, without explanation, without mercy. People begin to shift around you. Not obviously, not yet, but subtly. They stop asking you to carry things. They stop making eye contact when they pass you in the lane. Children who used to climb on your back and pester you for stories now hesitate before touching your hand. One of them asks if you're turning into a statue. You laugh, but it's the wrong kind of laugh, the kind that sounds too close to the truth. Worse still is how people begin to treat your condition like a reflection of your soul. They assume this is punishment, for pride, for laziness, for something you thought or did, or failed to confess. In a world where illness is seen as divine feedback, your body's slow rebellion must mean you did something to deserve it. You want to argue, but what can you say? That it's just bad luck? That your bones are growing in the wrong places for no reason at all? No one would believe you. No one would want to. Instead, you learn to apologize for existing. You speak softly. You move carefully. You don't mention when a new patch of stiffness creeps into your ribs, or when your fingers won't bend all the way anymore. You fake strength until it breaks you, and when someone inevitably comments on your posture, always your posture, you nod and say, "You'll work on it." as if discipline alone could unseal your bones. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder if they're right. Maybe it is your fault. Maybe you angered something, ate the wrong thing, looked at the wrong person, stepped on the wrong patch of cursed earth. It's easier to blame yourself than to sit with the truth, that your body is doing this all on its own, for no reason you'll ever know, and no power you understand can stop it. But guilt doesn't soften the bone, and silence doesn't slow it down. It doesn't take long before the explanations stop sounding like advice and start sounding like folklore. You notice the shift in tone first. People lower their voices when they speak about you, as though illness is something that can hear its name and take offence. They stop saying things like, maybe it's a chill, and start saying things like, maybe it's the stone. You don't know what stone they mean at first. Then someone points to the moss-covered boulder near the tree line, the one the children are told not to touch. You walked past it once, sat on it maybe. That's enough. Someone else swears you must have angered St. Cuthbert, or was it St. Agnes? You can't remember, because they keep changing the story. One version says you spoke poorly of the priest, another says you ploughed the field on a holy day, a third claims your grandmother stole a relic during the famine, and now you're the repayment. The stories get passed around like bread at a feast. Everyone adds something. No one questions anything. All of it sounds ridiculous, until you realise how seriously they're taking it. One day your cousin won't take food from your hands, says she's not hungry. You know she is. A week later, the old woman across the path spits on the ground when you pass. You don't say anything. You just keep walking, slower now because your ankle's beginning to lock. At church, you're offered a different bench. At the market, people find excuses to serve others first. No one says you're cursed, not directly. They just act like you might be. And in a place where fear speaks louder than reason, that's enough. Children are the first to say what adults won't. A little boy points at your arm and asks his mother if that's what happens when the fairies take part of you. She shushes him, but doesn't correct him. A girl asks if you're dying. Another one asks if you're going to turn to stone and stay that way forever. You want to laugh, but the words catch in your throat. What if they're right? What if, centuries from now, someone finds your skeleton and mistakes it for a statue? You try to explain once, just once, that it's not contagious, not a curse, not punishment. You say it plainly, as if certainty could protect you. But your voice trembles and your arm doesn't move, and no one believes you. The village doesn't need evidence. It needs patterns. And right now, you are the centre of one. The body breaking down, the crops failing slightly, the weather turning too early this year. No one says you caused it, but they're all thinking it. And thinking is enough. Soon your condition becomes a kind of warning, a lesson. Parents point at you when their children misbehave. Mind your manners, or you'll end up like them. It's unclear what lesson you're supposed to represent. Laziness, disobedience, blasphemy, walking on the wrong hill during the wrong moon. But the details don't matter. You are the story now, the figure in the cautionary tale. The hunched shadow children whisper about when they think you're not listening. Superstitions multiply in the absence of understanding. Someone suggests leaving salt at your doorstep. Another recommends keeping iron near the hearth in case your condition tries to spread. A visiting peddler hears about you and mutters something about changelings. You don't even know what that means, but you know it isn't good. The priest leads a special prayer one morning. Doesn't name you. Doesn't have to. Everyone knows what it's for. And then someone asks if you've been sleeping well. Not out of concern, but suspicion. Because one of the stories going around now is that you made a pact in a dream with a demon, or a spirit, or the devil himself. That would explain your condition, they say. That would explain why you don't scream when it gets worse. As if silence is suspicious. As if pain isn't exhausting. You're not contagious, but people behave like you are. They don't touch you anymore. They don't speak near you unless they have to. You're not locked up. but you are isolated. An invisible fence wrapped around your house, reinforced by glances, silences, and the occasional symbolic pile of ashes someone accidentally leaves at your door. You've never been more noticed and more ignored at the same time. You start to wonder what people will say after you're gone. Will they bury you like everyone else? Or will they burn you just to be safe? Will the children invent songs about the stone man in the woods? Will someone tell stories about how you once turned to stare at them, very slowly, and that your eyes glowed like coal? Probably. And they'll believe it too, because believing stories is easier than facing the truth, that the human body can sometimes collapse in ways too cruel to comprehend, and that there's nothing anyone can do about it. The worst part is that you begin to internalize it. You start to step around others before they even move. You preempt the fear, the flinching, the avoidance. You say less. You make yourself smaller, even as your body refuses to bend. You begin to carry your shame like a relic, worn and quiet, because it keeps people from asking questions. And if they stop asking, they'll stop looking. And if they stop looking, maybe they'll forget how afraid they are. But the fear never truly leaves. It lives in the space between their glances, in the silence at the edge of the crowd, in the way even your friends have started to cross themselves when you approach, just in case. Pain isn't new to you. You've known it your whole life. Blisters, splinters, bruises, hunger that feels like a hollow claw working through your ribs. But this pain is different. It doesn't throb or burn or sting. It creeps. It curls under your skin like a parasite and wraps itself around your muscles. It starts small, like a deep ache after hard work, but then it lingers, not for hours, for days, then weeks, then forever. The spasms come next. You'll be sitting near the fire, minding your own business, when your shoulder suddenly jerks, stiff as a board, pulling your neck sideways so violently that you bite your tongue. The muscle seizes like it's trying to twist itself out of your body, hardening until you can feel it bulge beneath the skin. You gasp and clutch at it, fingers digging into the knot, but there's no soft tissue to press, just tension and pressure, as if your body is trying to sculpt itself into something else, something rigid, something wrong. After each spasm, the pain dulls, not because it fades, but because the area goes still, like the muscle has died and left behind a ghost. You try to lift your arm and find it won't respond. Not entirely. It moves in pieces now, like a rusted hinge half swallowed by time. You tell yourself it's temporary. Maybe it just needs rest, or warmth, or prayer. But deep down, a thought settles in like mold on damp wood. It's not going to get better. This is what better looks like now. You test your range of motion daily, quietly, like someone sneaking food after dark. You try lifting a spoon. You try turning your head. You try brushing straw off your leg with a hand that no longer straightens. The results are always the same. Less. Less than yesterday. Less than the day before. It's a slow subtraction, but relentless. You start counting losses the way others count coins. Miserly, mournful, afraid to look too closely. There's no predicting where it will strike next. One day, your shoulder stiffens. The next, your jaw aches so sharply you can't chew without tears. You avoid hard bread, then soft bread, then anything at all. You start cutting everything into tiny bites with a shaking hand that won't grip a knife properly. And when even that fails, you mash your food into a paste and drink it from a bowl. You tell yourself it's easier this way. You lie to yourself a lot now. The swelling makes it worse. Your joints puff up like rotten fruit. Hot to the touch, angry, but they're not infected. Not in the way people understand. The flesh is just reacting to the bone growing underneath it, reshaping you from the inside out. Your body is building scaffolding where it shouldn't. Bone blooms in your muscles, like weeds cracking through cobblestones, snapping fibers apart and cementing them in place. You are slowly being imprisoned by your own biology. It's not just the pain that hurts, it's the betrayal. These are your arms, your legs, your neck, They've served you through a lifetime of drudgery, lifted sacks of grain, carried buckets of freezing water, held children, and now they're rebelling. Not in a blaze of collapse, but in a long, silent refusal to function. You try to will them into motion. You shout at them under your breath when no one's listening. You slap your own knee when it buckles. It doesn't help. The body isn't listening anymore. Sleep becomes complicated. You can't lie flat without discomfort. You can't curl up because your spine won't bend that way anymore. You stack straw into awkward shapes to cradle your joints, but it shifts in the night and you wake up worse than before. You dream of falling, of sinking into stone, of being buried in your own limbs. And when you wake, stiff and aching, you wonder if you were ever really asleep at all. Bathing is worse. You need help now, not completely, not yet, but enough that it makes you dread the process. You used to wash with a cloth, brisk and efficient. Now someone has to wring it out for you. You can't reach your back, can't scrub your neck. You sit there, half naked, body half frozen, while someone else dabs at you like you're a statue getting polished for display. They try to be gentle. That almost makes it worse. The stiffness spreads in waves. Some days are calm, others are full of fire. There's no rhythm to it, no warning. One morning you wake up and can't raise your elbow. Another, your neck locks halfway through a turn and stays there for hours. You start doing everything slowly, not out of caution, but because you have no choice. Life turns into a series of careful negotiations with gravity and time. You lean instead of lift, slide instead of step. The floor becomes your enemy. Stairs become unthinkable. Eventually, your arm won't move at all, not even a little. It's locked at your side, bent at the elbow, like you're perpetually carrying an invisible jug. The muscles have given up. The bones have sealed. You can feel the ridges beneath the skin, hard, unmoving, like iron bars beneath a wool coat. It doesn't even hurt anymore. Not in the sharp way. It's gone quiet, which somehow feels worse. People notice, of course. They pretend not to, but they do. They ask if you've injured yourself. You lie. You say you slipped, that you strained something, that you're healing. Healing. That word tastes bitter now. Your body isn't healing. It's converting, rewriting, redefining what it means to be you. One joint at a time. And it's only going to get worse from here. There was a time when you could roll out of bed, scratch something indecent, and be hauling firewood before your brain even caught up. Now getting out of bed is a tactical operation. You wake before dawn, not because of roosters, but because your joints demand a 15-minute negotiation before you can even sit up. First, you shift your weight, slowly, so as not to jolt the parts of you that have locked in the night. Then you stretch, or at least attempt to, which now means rocking back and forth like a bundled sack of oats until gravity takes pity on you. There is no graceful exit. There is only the hope that you don't fall. Standing is another ordeal. One leg works better than the other, and your hips are beginning to argue with the concept of balance. You learn to brace yourself on nearby furniture, a stool, a wall, a relative, if they're nearby and not startled easily. You rise inch by inch, holding your breath, as if the act of lifting your body is something that might wake the stone inside you. Once you're up, you pause. You always pause, to make sure nothing has locked up too badly overnight. To make sure your foot still feels like yours. To make sure today hasn't decided to be worse than yesterday. Dressing is its own humiliating ritual. Shirts are no longer garments, they're puzzles. You have to remember which arm goes in first because one of them doesn't bend anymore and the other only bends sometimes. You can't lift your arms above your head, so you have to maneuver your way into sleeves like a drunk eel threading itself through a basket. Tying a belt? That's a luxury. Buttons? Laughable. If you're lucky, someone helps. If you're not, you make do. Sometimes that means walking around half-dressed until shame outweighs the stiffness. Sometimes shame loses. You begin to develop a system. Everything in your life now depends on timing and proximity. You keep food close to where you sleep because you can't guarantee that the walk to the hearth will be manageable every morning. You set out a ladle and a bowl the night before, knowing your hands may not cooperate in the morning light. You plan your bathroom trips like a pilgrimage. Not too early, not too late, never uphill. You try not to drink too much at night. You try not to cough too hard during the day. You try not to need anything more than once. Walking is possible, but just barely. You shuffle now. Not out of laziness, but out of sheer survival. Lifting your feet is a gamble. The ground is uneven. You've tripped on things that aren't there. A root, a stone, a dream. You cling to walls, trees, anything solid. When none of those are available, you lean forward and trust momentum. It's worked so far, mostly. Your world shrinks. You stop going to the far edge of the village. You stop visiting the fields. You stop attending morning prayers in the chapel because there are 3 steps leading up to the door and you're not in the mood to crawl. You begin to arrange your life in circles, the bed, the table, the corner you use as a latrine. Everything else is optional. Everything else is too far. You move like someone hiding from their own body, slowly, cautiously, with a growing sense that any misstep could lock you in place permanently. And sometimes it does. You'll reach for something, a cup, a blanket, a piece of bread, and your shoulder will spasm, seize and then refuse to let go. You freeze, not from fear, but because movement is no longer a guarantee. You breathe through the pain, wait for the tension to pass, and try again. If it doesn't work, you leave it. Not worth the risk. Other people notice, but they pretend not to. Occasionally, someone will offer help. A cousin, a neighbour, a child who doesn't yet understand what's happening to you. You smile and wave them off, partly out of pride, mostly out of habit. Accepting help means admitting that you need it. Needing it means you're not getting better. And you've been lying to yourself too long to stop now. Even eating becomes a performance. Your jaw clicks. Your fingers don't hold spoons like they used to. You dribble stew down your chin because your lips don't seal properly anymore. You chew with the side of your mouth that still moves. You drink carefully, slowly, always with both hands, as if the cup might fight back. Sometimes it does. You spill more than you used to. You pretend not to notice. Everyone else pretends too. The hardest part is sleeping. It should be simple. You lie down. You close your eyes. But your body resists the concept of rest. It doesn't bend the way beds expect it to. Lying on your back hurts your hips. Lying on your side hurts your spine. You try to cushion yourself with straw and cloth, but it shifts during the night. And you wake up with your legs twisted, your joints aching, your breath shallow. Sometimes you wake and realize you haven't moved at all. Not for hours. That's the scariest part. Because movement means you're still fighting, still adjusting, still trying, still alive. Every action becomes deliberate, every breath measured. You no longer do anything quickly, not because you enjoy taking your time, but because speed is dangerous. Rushing leads to falls, to stumbles, to pain. And pain leads to fear, and fear makes everything worse. So you become a planner, a strategist. You organize your entire existence around what still works. You memorize your limitations. You learn to listen to the warning signs. The twitch in your side, that means your torso is about to seize. The ache in your knee, that means tomorrow will be harder than today. You live by these signals. You trust them more than you trust people. And all the while, you know that this is temporary. Not because you're getting better, but because it will get worse. At first, people asked how you were doing. Not many, not often. But a few kind souls tried. They would pause awkwardly, scratch their heads, glance down at your twisted hand or the rigid way you carried your arm, and ask if you were feeling better. It was never really a question, more like a hope, tossed into the air like a dried flower in winter. You always answered the same way, in a shrug, a nod, a soft, bit better today. even when it was worse, especially when it was worse. But those moments passed, the questions stopped. Not because you got better, but because you didn't. People don't like sickness that doesn't go away. It makes them uncomfortable. It doesn't fit their view of how the world is supposed to work. Pain is supposed to be followed by healing. Trouble is supposed to come with a lesson, then move on. You've done neither. You've just stayed, crooked, slow, stiff, and present. Now people talk around you instead of to you. When you're near, conversations shift, laughter dims, greetings shorten. You become a background object, something to step around or ignore. They don't say anything cruel. They don't have to. It's in the glances, the silence, the way no one stands too close unless they absolutely have to. It's in the way their eyes dart past your face, never quite landing. Like if they stare too long, they might start to freeze too. Some of them think you're faking. You've heard them. Whispers near the well. Muttered conversations just out of reach. Looks fine to me. Still milking it, is he? They see you sitting in the sun, not working, and assume laziness. They don't see the struggle to walk. They don't see you chewing your food for 10 minutes because your jaw only moves on one side. They don't see how long it takes to lift a bowl without spilling. And if they did, they'd find a reason not to believe it. Because disbelief is easier than admitting something this terrible could happen to someone who didn't deserve it. Others think you're cursed or being punished. They don't say that to your face either, but it's in the air. They nod grimly when you pass, like they're acknowledging your existence without condoning it. Some cross themselves quietly, others avoid speaking to you altogether. You've become a symbol, a walking warning, a reminder that the world doesn't always make sense, and that maybe, just maybe, God is still watching, and still very angry. Children are the most honest. They stare, they point. One little girl told you she dreamed about you, that you were a statue in the woods who came to life and chased her. Her mother hushed her, gave you an apologetic look, and hurried her away. But you heard the fear in the child's voice, and worse, you understood it. Because sometimes, when you look at yourself, you feel like a statue too. A figure half carved, stuck mid-motion, in a form that doesn't quite fit anymore. Your friends, if you can still call them that, don't know what to do with you. They try in their own limited way. One brings you bread every few days. Another fixes your roof without asking, but they don't stay to talk. They don't sit with you. They come, they nod, and they go. The visits are short. The silences are long. And when you try to speak of anything real, how much harder it's getting, how scared you are, their eyes glaze over, and they change the subject. They're not unkind, just tired and afraid and increasingly distant. There are moments still when someone surprises you. A child who doesn't know better might sit beside you, curious and unafraid. A stranger passing through might speak to you like a person. But those moments are rare, and they pass quickly. The older you look, the stiffer the stranger, the more those brief flickers of normalcy vanish. You're becoming a thing that people interact with, only when they must. A problem, a presence, a shadow that moves just enough to remain unsettling. You miss being invisible, not the kind of invisibility you have now, the one born of discomfort and pity, but the older, simpler kind. The kind where you were just another villager, another back bent in the field, another hungry mouth around the fire. You miss being forgettable. Now you're unforgettable in all the wrong ways. Worst of all is the pity. Not everyone avoids you. Some are drawn in, the way people are drawn to dying animals, slow, sorrowful, fascinated by the shape of suffering. They tilt their heads and murmur soft things like, "Poor soul," or "God be with him." They look at you like you've already died, like you're a corpse that hasn't gotten around to laying down yet. They speak about you while you're in the room. They offer prayers instead of conversation. And every time someone says they'll light a candle for you, you want to scream. You don't need candles. You need your spine back. You stop expecting company. You stop expecting anything. The space around you grows quieter, less touched. Even the dogs seem hesitant now. One used to sleep at your feet. Now it gives you a wide berth, as if it senses something off. You can't blame it. If you could, you'd avoid yourself too. So you sit, or lean or lie depending on what the day allows, and you listen to the village, to the voices that avoid your door, to the lives moving past you. You used to be part of them. Now you're simply near them. And every day, that distance grows wider. Eventually, the church notices you, not because they care about your suffering, but because your condition makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort tends to end up at the priest's doorstep. At first, it's subtle, a longer glance during Mass, a muttered blessing as you pass, a few murmurs about intercession and moral correction. Then comes the visit, the priest standing in your doorway, smelling of incense and damp wool, his hands folded in that way that means he's about to say something utterly useless. He doesn't ask how you're feeling. He asks if you've made confession recently. You nod, though you haven't, because there's no point. What would you even confess? That your bones are fusing and your knees scream when you try to sit? That you can no longer unclench your jaw all the way? And your spine has started to bow like a door warped by rain? He doesn't care about that. He wants to talk about your soul. He tells you this could be a trial, that God may be testing your faith through affliction, that many saints suffered greatly and bore their pain with dignity. He lists a few: Saint Lawrence, roasted alive; Saint Bartholomew, flayed; Saint Agnes, burned and beheaded. It's meant to be comforting. It isn't. Those saints at least died quickly. You, on the other hand, are being turned into stone inch by inch, with no fiery martyrdom and no feast day in sight. The church doesn't see you as a person with a problem. You're a theological puzzle, a curiosity, a case study, perhaps a warning. Your condition doesn't inspire empathy. It inspires interpretation. Some say you're being punished, though they're careful not to say it outright. Instead, they say things like, "The Lord moves in mysterious ways, and there is purpose in every pain." When you ask what that purpose might be, they deflect with parables and metaphors, all of which involve people suffering nobly and dying conveniently. Others take a different view. They say perhaps this isn't punishment. Maybe it's a miracle. Maybe you're being transformed for a reason. Maybe God is turning you into a living statue to remind people of repentance, a divine monument, a symbol. They talk about it as if you're lucky, as if losing the ability to bend your elbow is some sort of gift. You try to smile when they say this, but your facial muscles don't quite cooperate anymore, and the result is something more like a grimace. They mistake it for peace. They always do. You start to notice changes in how the church treats you. You're not expected to kneel during services anymore, a mercy, though not one born of kindness. You're a disruption now, a presence that draws attention. The priest begins using you in sermons, not by name, but by implication. He speaks about patience in the face of affliction, about accepting God's will with grace, about enduring suffering without complaint. Parishioners nod along and glance in your direction. You sit perfectly still, partly from shame, partly because your back won't allow anything else. No one prays for your comfort. They pray for your purpose, that you might serve as an example, a lesson, a reflection of God's mysterious plan. You are a vessel now, not of compassion, but of meaning. People light candles, but not for your healing. For their own reassurance, they ask God to make sense of your condition, to turn your pain into wisdom, to use your body as a message written in bone. You never agreed to be a message. You never had a choice. One day, a travelling friar visits. He hears about you and insists on seeing you for himself. He walks into your home with an air of holy curiosity and circles you slowly, as if expecting to find stigmata or divine light leaking from your joints. He asks you to describe the pain. You do. He nods thoughtfully and says suffering is a form of prayer. You ask if it's working. He doesn't answer. Instead, he places a relic, a finger bone, in a gilded box on your table and tells you to keep it close. You ask if it will help. He says it will remind you that others have suffered too. Then he leaves. You grow tired of being a symbol, a metaphor, a moral. You want someone to treat you like a human being, not a cautionary tale, not a miracle in progress, not a vessel for divine judgment. Just someone who's hurting and scared and slowly losing their ability to sit upright without assistance. But no one does. They're too busy trying to figure out what you mean to see who you are. You begin skipping mass. At first you say it's because of the cold, or the stairs, or the weather. Eventually you stop giving excuses. No one presses you, not because they respect your decision, but because your absence makes the service easier, less awkward, less confusing. People can go back to their prayers without having to look at you. A walking reminder that faith doesn't always come with healing, and that not all afflictions end in miracles. At night, when you lie stiffly in your bed and stare at the roof, you wonder if you really are being punished. You search your memory for sins big enough to warrant this. You think about all the things you've done wrong, the petty lies, the stolen apples, the time you wished someone ill. They don't seem like enough, but then again, maybe the punishment was never about what you did. Maybe it's just about what you are now, broken, immobile, and inconvenient. And maybe that's enough. Once word spreads that you're unwell, not just unwell but strange, the remedies start pouring in. Not from doctors because there are no doctors, but from everyone else who fancies themselves an expert in things they don't understand. The first suggestions are relatively harmless. Prayers mostly. Your neighbour insists that if you say the Lord's Prayer backwards while touching your stiffest joint, you'll be cured by the next full moon. You try it. Nothing happens except that you feel ridiculous and your knees hurt from kneeling too long. Next comes the poultice phase. Every plant within walking distance is crushed, boiled and rubbed on your skin. Comfrey, nettles, wormwood, even mashed up garlic, which makes you smell like you've been slow roasting yourself for supper. The healer applies a poultice made of lard and sage and wraps your arm in old cloth. It stays there for 2 days, during which your skin itches like it's trying to escape your bones. When the cloth comes off, the joint is red and angry, and you still can't move it. She looks disappointed in you. Someone recommends bloodletting. You're not surprised, that's the standard answer to everything. Headache? Bloodletting? Grief? Bloodletting? Probably just bored? Definitely bloodletting. So you agree. And the village boy, who learned how to do it from watching a butcher, slices open your arm with a knife that's mostly clean. He collects your blood in a cracked bowl and says he'll use it for reading, whatever that means. The wound takes 3 weeks to heal. Your stiffness gets worse. Then comes the suggestion you knew was coming, a pilgrimage. If prayer at home isn't enough, clearly you need to drag your failing body across miles of uneven terrain to a holy site built on some saints' bones. The priest offers a list. Most of them are weeks away. One is a day's walk, but up a steep hill you already struggle to climb. Your family starts talking about how to transport you, not with you, but like you, as if you're already cargo. You consider it, briefly. Maybe the journey would change something, or kill you. Either outcome sounds like a sort of progress. You don't go, not because you aren't willing, but because you can't. A trip that once would have taken you an afternoon would now take days, assuming you didn't collapse in a ditch halfway there. And while saints may have performed miracles, you don't imagine they specialise in spinal fusions and rogue bone growth. Instead, someone brings you a relic, a splinter of wood, allegedly, from a martyr's cross. You sleep with it under your straw mattress for a week. You wake up every morning stiffer than before. Then there's the man with the branding iron. He's not a healer. He's not even from your village. Just a tanner's apprentice who once saw an injured dog stop limping after getting burned by a coal. He says the heat resets things, melts the pain right out of the body. You ask him if the dog lived. He says it ran away. That's supposed to be encouraging. He offers to do the same for your shoulder. Says he'll heat the iron and press it right where the pain is. You politely decline. He insists. You impolitely decline. He sulks. Later, someone tells you he tried it on a pig once. It didn't go well. Another woman brings you a charm, a little bag of twine, dried herbs, and what might be a tooth. She says it's from the old ways passed down from her grandmother. She tells you to wear it around your neck and never take it off, even when bathing. You don't bathe often anyway, so that's not the issue. The problem is that after a few days, it starts to smell like mildew and regret. You take it off. She sees you without it the next week and frowns. You pretend not to notice. Eventually, you try something of your own. Heat, mostly. You sit close to the fire, hoping warmth might soften the stone. You soak rags and wrap them around your joints, waiting for something to loosen. It doesn't. It never does. The stiffness doesn't care if it's hot or cold or blessed or boiled. It just continues, slowly, patiently, like it knows it has time. The problem with all these remedies isn't just that they fail, it's that each one leaves you slightly worse. A new bruise, a fresh burn, another day lost to false hope. Your skin becomes irritated from repeated wrappings. Your limbs ache from being bent and prodded in ways they no longer tolerate. Your dignity thins with every whispered ritual, every awkward touch from someone too afraid to ask what's really happening. You stop volunteering for treatment. People stop offering. That should feel like relief, but it doesn't. It feels like abandonment, just another kind, quieter than the rest. Eventually, the remedies stop altogether. Not because you're healed, but because you're considered beyond help. No one wants to waste effort on something they can't fix. They call it acceptance, but what they mean is surrender. They light a candle for you at Mass and count that as enough. You're now something to be comforted, not cured, pitied, not treated. And when people speak of you, they no longer ask what might help. They ask how long you have left. So you sit with the bruises, the burns, the lingering itch of every failed cure, and you come to a grim conclusion. The only thing more dangerous than your disease is everyone else's need to solve it. To your horror, your condition continues to worsen. You notice it first in the morning, when you try to sit up and realize your back doesn't bend. Not just sore, not just stiff, immobile. Your spine is no longer a stack of joints, but a single, unyielding rod that holds your body upright whether you want it to or not. At first you try to fight it. You twist gently, then harder. You wedge a pillow behind you and lean back slowly, hoping something will give. All that gives is your breath. You grunt, then you stop. Because you know this feeling now. It's the same that crept into your arm, then your neck, then your hip. Tightness, then pressure, then permanence. Your back has decided to become one continuous piece. Less like a person and more like a wooden beam. The ribs follow, one at a time, subtly at first. Breathing becomes noticeable in a way it never was before. You're aware of every inhale, how it stretches your chest, how it brushes against the edge of pain, how shallow it has to be to avoid triggering the sharp twinge that blooms under your sternum. You adapt, shorter breaths, slower movements. You avoid coughing. You avoid laughing. Not that anything has been particularly funny lately. Sleeping becomes a negotiation. You can't lie flat anymore, not comfortably, and not without help. Someone, usually a family member who's grown quieter in your presence over the months, must lower you into place like a sack of barley. You lie on your back because your side won't bend, and even if it did, your shoulder locks at such a sharp angle that the idea of rolling over feels like a myth. You sleep like a plank, stiff and tense, a relic on display that no one dares disturb. You start drooling. That's new. At first you think you're imagining it, just a bit of wetness on your pillow. But it happens again, and again. because your jaw doesn't close all the way anymore, and your lips don't always remember how to seal. It's subtle but humiliating. You're still here, still thinking, still aware of every change, but your body is gradually forgetting what it means to be human. People begin to speak about you in softer tones, not in kindness, in caution. They move around you like you're fragile. And they're right, you are, not just brittle but poorly balanced. A stumble now would mean something cracking, splintering, refusing to heal. You've become careful to a fault. Every step is rehearsed, every motion planned hours in advance. You no longer react to the world. You anticipate it, adjust to it, work around it. You live defensively. There's a moment when you try to bend forward to pick something up, something simple, like a spoon, and realize you can't. You're standing. The spoon is on the floor, and there's no way, no angle, no strategy that will allow you to reach it. You stare at it for a long time. Too long. Then someone else picks it up and hands it to you without a word. You mumble thanks. They nod and leave. And you realize that it wasn't just a spoon you dropped. It was autonomy. Your breathing changes. It becomes more effortful, more deliberate. Deep breaths feel dangerous, too expansive, too risky. You breathe in careful, measured doses, like a miser rationing out coins. Sometimes you wake in the night and feel like you've forgotten how. Your chest doesn't rise the way it used to. You sit upright, slowly, stiffly, and wait for the rhythm to return. It always does. But each time, it takes longer. The worst part isn't the stillness. It's the sensation. You feel everything. Every locked joint, every frozen ligament, every phantom itch on a part of your body you can no longer scratch. You feel the tension in your back when someone helps you shift in bed. You feel the pull in your chest when you try to speak, and your ribs refuse to expand with your voice. You feel your toes tingling at night, curled in a position you can't adjust, and you lie there hoping morning will loosen something. It never does. You no longer sit. You're placed. Others arrange your limbs, prop you up, adjust you as gently as they can. You've become furniture with a heartbeat, a statue that requires maintenance. You hate it, but you need it. You can't dress yourself, can't bathe yourself, can't shift your weight without someone steadying you. Every task now begins with the phrase, "Can someone help?" Your body becomes a cage, not metaphorically, literally. A cage of bone forming where there should be freedom. Your muscles have been repurposed into scaffolding. Your tendons reinforced with uninvited growth. You're still in there, still very much aware, but there's less and less space to live in. Every day, a little more of you disappears behind the walls of your own biology. You wonder how much longer you have before speaking becomes difficult, before eating becomes impossible, before breathing finally stops being automatic. You wonder what the final locked joint will be. Will it be your throat, your lungs, your heart? You don't cry, not because you're brave, but because your tear ducts don't always work properly anymore. But if they did, you're not sure you'd be able to stop. There's grief in every inch of you, not just for what you've lost, but for how long the losing takes. This isn't death. This is the slowest form of burial imaginable, one bone at a time. And you're still awake for all of it. At some point, people stop asking if you'll get better and start arranging their lives around the fact that you won't. It's subtle at first. Someone brings the water bucket to you instead of expecting you to fetch it. Meals start being served closer to your bed. Conversations happen across the room instead of with you, like you're a piece of the wall that happens to breathe. You're still spoken to sometimes, but never expected to move in response. And eventually, no one waits for you to. You are no longer a person in motion. You are a location, a place someone visits. You occupy a corner of the home the way a bench does, or a loom, or an old coat rack too useful to throw away. People walk past you with care, not because they fear hurting you, but because sudden movement might jostle whatever position your limbs are frozen in today. You're not exactly fragile. You're just increasingly difficult to manage. The roles reverse slowly. Where once you moved through your world, now the world moves around you. Others light the fire, others gather the kindling. Someone turns you in bed when your side grows sore, or adjusts your knees so your joints don't seize harder than they already have. The line between what you do and what is done for you has blurred into near total dependency. You didn't notice when it happened, or maybe you did, and you just couldn't stop it. Being fed becomes normal, not always by hand, though sometimes, yes, when your fingers won't grip the spoon, but often enough that it no longer surprises you. Someone blows on your food before giving it to you. Someone else wipes your chin with a cloth when your lips don't catch the broth just right. You're grateful, you're humiliated, you say thank you every time, not because you're overly polite, but because it's the only power you still have left. The power to be gracious, the power to pretend you have a choice in any of it. Bathing is worse. You used to be able to manage with a damp cloth, awkward but private. Now you are washed like an infant, carefully, lovingly sometimes, mechanically other times. Your body is no longer something you own. It's something people maintain, like a leaky roof or a warped door frame. They lift your arms, now mostly useless. They sponge under your chin, your ribs, your curled fingers. They avoid your eyes, you avoid theirs. That's the only part of the ritual that feels mutual. Eventually, you stop being able to get to the door. Someone props it open so you can see outside. The lane, the goats, the sky when it isn't raining. But you haven't crossed that threshold in a long time. You still dream about it sometimes. Stepping into the yard, feeling the dirt under your feet, stretching your arms wide. Then you wake up to the cold stiffness of your limbs, locked in the same position as yesterday. And the memory of movement feels absurd, like remembering what it was like to fly. Children start treating you differently. Before they were curious, now they're cautious. They whisper when they pass the door, peeking in like you're part of the furnishings, something vaguely sacred or possibly haunted. One of them calls you the man who turned to wood. You laugh or try to, but the sound that comes out is dry and jagged, like a broom being dragged across stone. The child runs off. You don't blame them. Visitors speak past you, not out of cruelty, just habit. You've become a fixture, someone to be navigated around. They enter, drop off supplies, exchange words with whoever is caring for you that day, and leave again. Sometimes they remember to nod in your direction. Occasionally, they ask how you're doing. But they ask the question the same way they might ask about the weather. Polite, brief, already moving on. Your voice begins to falter. Not because your thoughts are fading, but because your mouth no longer always obeys. Your jaw has to be worked slowly in the morning. And even then, your words slur. You start speaking less. People begin assuming more. They fill in your silence with whatever they think you mean. You nod, even when they're wrong. Correcting them would take too much effort, and most days, you're already tired before the sun finishes rising. You're still in there somewhere, still watching, still thinking, still tracking every tick of decline. But the outside world sees only the outline of what you once were. They call you strong, noble, enduring. They say things like, what a burden he must carry, as if this is something you picked up on purpose. You want to scream. You want to tell them you didn't choose to be a statue, that you didn't ask to become furniture in your own life. But screaming takes breath, and breath is a resource you manage carefully now. Some days no one visits. Those are the quietest and somehow the loudest. You hear the wind through the thatch, the creak of wood, the rustle of cloth as you shift, slowly, with great intention, a few degrees toward the light. You watch the sun crawl across the floor and imagine what it feels like to chase it. But chasing is for bodies that move. Yours has other plans. You're not dead, you're not dying, you're simply no longer participating. You are present, but not involved, seen but not interacted with, loved maybe in a distant, patient way, but no longer touched unless absolutely necessary. You are handled, you are moved, you are still. You have become furniture, and you are still trying to remember what it felt like not to be. There is no dramatic ending, no final gasp, no sudden collapse, no deathbed revelation, surrounded by candlelight and loved ones murmuring prayers. You always assumed death would have weight to it, some undeniable moment that split your life into before and after. But the truth is far duller. Your death is slow, quiet, and utterly ordinary. It arrives like everything else in your life has, by degrees, without fanfare, and against your will. You begin to eat less. At first it's a matter of effort. Chewing takes time, and your jaw no longer obeys like it used to. Swallowing feels like a negotiation with your own throat. You choke once or twice, not badly, just enough to make the person feeding you hesitate before handing over the next spoonful. Eventually, the meals become smaller. Broth instead of bread, mashed roots instead of meat, food meant for children or the toothless elderly. You pretend it's fine. You say you're not hungry. You smile weakly to reassure them. But the truth is simpler. Eating hurts, and it's getting harder to justify the pain for a bowl of tasteless gruel. Your body starts shrinking, not just in weight, though there's plenty of that. You lose muscle mass, yes, but you also lose presence. Your clothes hang looser. Your skin stretches oddly over places where there used to be shape. Your limbs, already stiff, now look thin and angular, like they were carved out of leftover wood. The less you eat, the less you weigh. The less you weigh, the easier it is for people to carry you. That's what it all comes down to now. How manageable you are. Infections come easily. A sore that won't heal. A patch of skin that turns red, then angry, then dangerous. You can't move enough to shift your weight often, so pressure builds on the same points day after day. A heel, a shoulder blade, the base of your spine. The skin splits, the air stings, the wound festers. Someone tries to clean it with boiled water and rags, but there's no such thing as sterile in your world. There's only effort. Sometimes that effort is enough, other times it isn't. Your breathing changes again. You used to struggle for breath after movement. Now you struggle doing nothing at all. The expansion of your chest has become an ordeal. It doesn't open the way it once did. The bones, fused and stubborn, press in against your lungs. You lie awake at night, counting each breath, rationing them like something precious. In, outside, each one a small triumph, each one carrying the fear that the next might not come. No one says it out loud, but they know. The people who care for you, whether they're family, neighbours, or those kind enough to still stop by, start to treat you more gently. They speak more softly. Their hands linger longer. There's no formal acknowledgement, just a shift in tone, a softness in their faces, a quiet urgency behind their kindness. They know the end is coming, and like you, they're not quite sure when. You're not in agony exactly. There's pain, yes, always, but by now, you've grown used to it. The stiffness, the cramps, the sharp stabs when a joint tries to move and fails. But none of it is new. It's just your life, condensed into sensation. What gets harder is the awareness. You are still in there, still thinking, still listening, still watching the world go on without you, with fewer and fewer points of contact. You watch the door open and you do not turn your head. You hear voices and you no longer answer. Not because you don't want to, but because it takes too much. Sleep comes more easily now. Not restful sleep, but that in-between space, not fully conscious, not truly gone. You drift more often. You lose time. Someone will come in and speak to you, and you'll hear them, but the words will swim together. You blink and hours pass, days blur, you stop keeping track. It no longer matters what time of day it is. The light shifts on the wall, and that's the only clock you follow. Eventually, people stop asking if you're comfortable. They know you aren't. The question becomes rhetorical. Someone wipes your brow. Someone else changes the cloth beneath your chin. They do it not out of hope, but out of duty. You appreciate it, even if you no longer have the strength to say so. You try once to say thank you, or maybe goodbye, but your throat tightens, your lips don't form the shape, and the sound never escapes. You don't die in a blaze of drama. There's no storm, no divine light, no sudden silence that stuns the room. You simply slow down, each breath a little shallower, each blink a little longer. You drift in and out like a candle guttering in still air, until one time, just once, you forget to come back. And that's it. They find you in the morning, or the evening. No one's quite sure when you went. Someone touches your hand, already cooling. Someone else crosses themselves. There is no scream, no sob, just a quiet sigh and a bowed head. You had been leaving for a long time. Today was only the final step. There's no funeral procession, no church bell tolls in your honour. Someone says a prayer, probably. Maybe the priest recites a psalm in a flat voice while a cousin you barely spoke to shovels the dirt. Your body, once carefully tended by the people around you, is now just a thing to be buried. Not a person, not a legacy, just weight. Fragile, difficult weight. They do their best. The ground is cold and the hole isn't deep. There's no marker, no carved stone. A scrap of cloth maybe, or a smooth river rock set nearby so someone can remember where the digging stopped. But that fades too. Soon there's just soil and silence. Your name lasts a little longer, whispered occasionally, mentioned in passing. A story half told over a bowl of soup. Do you remember the one who stopped moving? The man who turned stiff like a board? But the details vanish, the memory flattens. You become a fable, then a footnote, then nothing. A generation passes, and no one remembers where you were buried. 2 generations, and no one remembers you existed at all. Time moves on. Your bones remain. They don't rot like flesh. They don't soften like memories. They hold their shape, fused, rigid, unnatural, long after everything else has crumbled. Decades turn to centuries. The hut collapses. The village expands, contracts, relocates. The path beside your grave becomes a garden, then a patch of rocks, then forgotten altogether. But beneath the ground, your skeleton stays, arms bent at strange angles, ribs locked together, spine curved like a frozen question. Hundreds of years later, someone digs you up. They're wearing gloves, they have tools, they brush the dirt away from your skull like they're unveiling a relic. And in a way, they are. You're not just old, you're weird. Your bones don't look like the others they've found. Your joints are fused, your limbs are rigid, your ribcage seems sealed. One of them gasps, another pulls out a notebook. They start whispering words you never heard in life. Ossification, congenital disorder, fibrodysplasia. They're not afraid, they're fascinated. To them, you're a mystery, a puzzle in the dirt, a physical question with no surviving answer. They take photos, they measure your limbs. One of them, with round glasses and a quiet voice, says you must have suffered. They're right, but their tone holds admiration, not pity, the kind of awe people reserve for endurance that doesn't make sense. You're not a tragedy to them. You're data. They'll write papers about you. They'll publish articles. You'll be referred to as the individual discovered in the Northern Trench, a specimen, a subject, not a man, not a peasant, not someone who woke up each morning aching and afraid, just bones, strange ones, ones worth studying. They'll give you a number. They'll assign you a case file. And if they're feeling poetic, maybe even a nickname. The Stone Man, or something equally blunt. They won't know what to call you because no one ever did. Not in your village, not in your church, not even in your own family once you stopped answering. They'll never know your favourite food. They won't know which hand you used to hold a spoon before it stopped working. They'll never see the way your fingers used to twitch when you tried to reach for a cup and missed. They won't hear your voice, the way it rasped near the end, or how you used to hum when no one was around. They'll never know how many days you spent waiting for death, or how quietly it came. But they'll marvel at your skeleton. They'll hold up models of your spine in classrooms and say, "This is incredibly rare." They'll circle the places where bone shouldn't be and explain how your muscles betrayed you. They'll name the disease, something you never knew you had, and they'll say it with certainty, with science, as if that changes anything, as if diagnosis could ever have made your life easier. Still, part of you is grateful, not in the conscious sense, you've long since returned to dust, but in that strange, enduring way we all hope not to be erased completely. Someone saw you, not in life perhaps, but, eventually, someone noticed that your body didn't work the way it should have, and instead of flinching or turning away, they leaned in. They asked questions. They wondered what it must have been like to live inside that skeleton, day after day. Of course, they'll get most of it wrong. They'll make guesses about your lifestyle, your status, your age. They'll think you were malnourished, which you were. They'll think you worked hard, which you did. They'll imagine you as stoic, brave, noble. They won't picture the drooling, the bed sores, the days you couldn't hold down food. They'll give you too much dignity. It's almost touching. And then, eventually, they'll move on. Your bones will be stored, labelled, maybe displayed, maybe kept in a box, tucked in a university archive next to dozens of others who were also once people, now reduced to remains. You won't be lonely, not really, but you will be silent, as you always were near the end, preserved in stiffness, captured by the very thing that ruined you. You are no longer forgotten, but you are still not remembered. And that's the end of tonight's long, bone-cracking crawl through a life spent slowly turning into stone. If you're still awake, thanks for drifting through the history with me. If you'd like early access or just want to support the madness, the Patreon's in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which joint locking up would have been your final straw. Sleep well, while you still can,